great panel lined up for you all. We'll take a minute and do intros, but after this session, we'll also have a pitch session for 8 startups in the ag tech robotics space, so really excited for that too. So stick around. We have a fun afternoon planned. To kick us off with introductions, my name is Bijoy. I'll be moderating today. I am an investor with Fulcrum Global Capital. We're an early stage ag tech VC focused both on the really early stage Petri dish side, including the biological stuff, but also on the ag tech robotics and automation side. So I've been coming to this conference for 3 years, and my claim to fame is that we found our latest investment last year, Nico Robotics, through this conference. So definitely lots of good relationships to be had, and looking forward to talking to you all about VC, startups, ag tech, all of the above. Find me after if you're interested. But I'll hand it over to Darcy to introduce himself.
Thanks. My name is Darcy Cook. I am the head of autonomous solutions with PTx Trimble. I came to that position through acquisition, so I was one of the owners with a partner of a company called JCA Technologies that was purchased by AGCO 2 years ago. And then most recently, the team that I lead was contributed to a joint venture between AGCO and Trimble, which is forming a PTx Trimble. So that's the agricultural division of Trimble, joined with my team that came from the JCA side of things to form PTx Trimble. And so now I lead all the autonomy solutions and deployment of retrofit autonomous solutions to mixed fleet for corn and soybeans operations, as leading all the autonomy efforts across AGCO and within PTx as well. Alex?
Yeah. Hi, Alex Russomagno. I joined AGCO a little over a year ago to help us formalize and operationalize a corporate venture capital initiative. And so I say initiative because really our priority is around really fostering business development and strategic partnership and collaboration opportunities, and really kind of be a center of the funnel to building more proactively presence in the venture ecosystem, and making the right connections to the right stakeholders internally so that we can see what we can make happen together. But we now have this pool of capital that we can leverage that's really dedicated to adding value kind of above and beyond what we can achieve alone through those commercial relationships.
Good afternoon. My name is Kyle Cobb. I'm the president and co-founder of Advanced Farm. We're based just about 20 minutes south of here in Davis, and we started in 2018 to build harvesting robots for fresh fruits and vegetables. Our current focus is on apples. So we've spent a lot of time up in Washington State this year. Similar to Bijoy, we were fortunate enough to be introduced to Case New Holland, one of Michele's colleagues a few years ago here at FIRA, and we look forward to talking more about our relationship since then.
Good afternoon, everybody. Michele Lombardi, CNH Industrial. I'm the head of corporate development and also the head of venture capital, which we found 2.5 years ago. We've invested in Advanced Farm, a good friend Kyle and the rest of the team. And it's very exciting, actually, to walk around. I spent the morning walking around to see so many different friends here, people we've invested in and people we've known since they started. And it's exciting to see how so much optimism is resisting through these difficult times. So keep it up.
Awesome. So obviously we can tell that there's both the OEM perspective as well as the fundraising and startup perspective on the panel. So we've kind of broken up the discussion into 3 main sections: planting, managing, and harvesting. I think aptly named for the industry that we operate in. So we'll start with planting, talking about how startups engage with OEMs and the relationship that is kind of kicking it off. Move on to managing and talk about what happens after investment or after collaboration, and then finally talk about acquisition, mergers, all that stuff in the last section. So I guess to start us off, let's start with the planting section. From the OEM perspective, for Michele and Alex, when looking at startups, what technologies are the most interesting to you?
Sure, take it away. So we are a pure play ag OEM. So really the first thing is kind of farmer first solutions. It's super important for us and really kind of core to our strategy. And looking at products and solutions at every point in the crop cycle, sustainable crop production systems, ways to optimize input and natural resources. But really looking for technologies that are giving an ROI really under 2 years, really ideally closer to 1, and not just reducing costs, but yield improvement, productivity improvement. something with novel IP. We're always kind of looking for what the secret sauce is in those companies. And then, for us, most of our focus is actually broadacre. And so because of that, is the company really solving with the unit economics first and foremost in mind when they're developing these technologies? Because in broadacre, it's a game of high volume, low margin. So that it's super important for adoption.
Well, naturally, CNH and AGCO play in similar spaces. Taking it from a different angle, what we look for in startups when we look at investing is actually finding technologies, ideas, IP, teams that will help us accelerate our technology roadmap down the different lanes that Alex described. We complement very well, we try to complement very well with the startups. We'll see in the next few questions, it's a difficult equilibrium to bring an OEM to play with tiny companies. But what we are looking for is that ability to tag team. We learn and contribute to the startup and basically create a stronger ecosystem across.
Yeah, so I guess that transitions well into the next question for both of you. How do you balance that internal, external collaboration when looking at startups?
Should I start?
Yeah, please.
I'll take it from different angles. First of all, internally as an organization, we tend to split the investment the team that manages the investment from the team that manages the technology or commercial relationship. We do that on purpose so that there's no managerial conflict, if you want, taking different decisions. We normally allocate specific people to work with the startup, so we have lead teams. And as corporate development, what we do is we maintain the overall relationship. We make sure that things are flowing properly. We capture any issues that might emerge from the startup, being overwhelmed, underutilized, or whatever the consequence of our playing together could be. Our view is very long-term, so we are not under any immediate pressure. What we really care about is that the startup is successful, develops a solution, and integrates well to the extent possible with their development, with our own development, so that we can bring to market solutions that can benefit from the collaboration.
Yeah, I would really echo a lot of the same things Michele just said. We are strategic investors first, financial second, and so for us, we want to at least, and I would say because we are just kind of starting now, we're really just in our first year of this, we really want, our first few investments really need to be slam dunks, and we're more quality over quantity, and we really want to make sure that we are driving strategic value, not just back for us, because it's something that we report on, but also back to the startup, and making sure that we're really adding value from the cap table that's more than just monetary. And so to do that, also look to have business sponsor accountability and making sure that we have someone who can actually deliver and support them in the ways that we can as a big corporate. And we do that by having this business sponsorship, and we want to make sure that we have these commercial relationships, if not already established, a very strong pathway to do so that we know that we can deliver on those things. As we are kind of growing up as a venture group, one of the things that we are doing to help balance that, because really the value of any venture group at a corporation is being able to see the 5-10 years out and preparing yourself for the future. So we are doing some investments in venture capital funds as a way for us to continue to gain some of that knowledge, keep an arm's length with some of these companies, because some of these companies are too early to maybe have a strategic on their cap table. And so allow us to build a relationship, build that pathway, and still catalyze the industry without having kind of a direct relationship, so that when we are ready to engage more meaningfully, we have a pathway to doing so.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's an interesting approach to investing that not many CVCs take. So it's a interesting lens for sure. So kind of shifting to the fundraising perspective. So Darcy and Kyle, when you're looking to take money in from a strategic investor, what are some things that you look for in that relationship?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, my path was a little bit different in that we were bootstrapped and self-funded until with the acquisition, so we didn't have this investment period there. But I would say in the decision-making of the acquisition, it was, and I had a partner, so we had different stages in life, different things. partner was looking to mitigate risk, but for myself, it was very much about, is this an opportunity to scale? And so what I cared very much about is that we had built something that I was very proud of, and I felt was right on the edge of scaling with the maturity in the industry related to autonomy and our autonomy technology, and wanted to make sure the partnership was right to ensure that we would really be able to scale that. And so, and you know, I'm 2 years into it, and we have done a lot of that down that path. So, you know, to me, the importance was all the strategic value. It was really like, could this be a partnership that will not just kill this thing that we've built, but something that would really help to grow it and scale it and pair well with the needs of the organization?
Sure, yeah, to give a perspective from sort of the earlier stage, pre-acquisition, I think there's the first and most important thing with a strategic investor or any investor is just to make sure they're a good fit, that they are a good fit culturally, that they get along well with the board members, and that there's sort of a mutual respect for the work that the startup is doing and the work that the corporate is doing. I think another thing that's really benefited us is to have really strong, empowered sponsors within the CVCs that we're working with, that allows us to sort of keep the pace of play that we're comfortable with, and also allows some continuity in a relationship where big companies also change priorities, right? And it's great to have a good point person who can always have your best interests in mind. And I think the last thing is something that strategics can add unique value, and a way they can add unique value is really by taking that long-term perspective that Michele and Alex talked about. I think we're very fortunate to have some financial investors who also, you know, are very committed. But I think generally speaking, financial investors might only focus on one stage, for example. And I think a strategic investor can bridge across a relationship across multiple stages of investment, multiple phases of a company. And so I think really assessing what the intentions are early on in the relationship is a pretty important part of making sure that it's going to be healthy long term.
Yeah, so I guess that prompts another question. When's the right time to take money from a strategic? And is it ever too early or too late? And yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we, just for background, we took our first strategic investment came from a sort of at the same time Yamaha and Kubota invested in our Series A back in 2019, and then we welcomed CNH onto the cap table in 2023. And I'd say that, you know, Series A to me, just to try to give practical advice, I think Series A seems like about the right time, because it's a time in your company when I feel like you're starting to really develop your identity for the next stage of a company. It's also usually a time where there's a good balance from a economic point of view, where you know, a strategic investor can have a fair entry point at an investment level that they're typically more comfortable with than, say, a later stage investment where it might be even too late to start to get to know one another, or it's going to take more time to get comfortable with that level of risk. But the startup is far enough along that, you know, they also have some, let's say, negotiating power or some ability to make sure that the economics are also favorable for them. So my really practical advice would be Series A and B seem like a great time, but I'd say just more broadly speaking, it's never too soon to start working on developing the relationship. It doesn't have to always be so transactional, and I think that really comes back to benefit you when the time comes that there is a good fit for both parties.
Yeah, so I guess maybe to wrap up this first section on planting, if you're a startup in the audience, how do you start these conversations? And from both perspectives, when did you start it, and how did you maintain and develop those relationships? But from the corporate perspective, how should they reach out?
So from my perspective, I mean, again, a big part of like evolving was finding a business model that could self-sustain for a while. It was a business model that eventually would not scale, but it allowed us to be wrong a whole bunch of times before really building something that we felt could scale. And I think that's really critically important, because no matter who you are and how smart you are, you're going to be wrong about a lot of things. And so I think the biggest learning is through the market and the feedback there. Our business model really was integrating with OEMs, with our technology. And so our connections were established through the nature of the business model by basically going out there and connecting with OEMs for the sake of integrating to that. And that's eventually how we connected with AGCO, is through projects there. That was a really good number one, long-term learning of the whole ecosystem and market and the dynamics and nature of different companies and how they function internally and where their risk profiles are. So that was my experience on how to integrate with OEMs.
I think for me, there's just two things that come to mind. One is I try to tell myself, just take the meeting. And what I mean by that is, conferences sometimes can be far away, or you've had a long week in the field, or, your startups are hectic. And so it's hard to have the energy to go to these conferences and network. And I think I would just think, I have so many examples, as I'm sure many of you do, about, these incidental points of contact that turn into really deep relationships. And so I think it's really important just to start the funnel broad and be genuine with your interaction. And then on to that point too, I think as we've gotten to know many of our strategic partners, I think just being really honest is a really good start. And that means, asking a lot of questions, being open to their questions. And I think, as you'll get to know Michele, I think you'll see that he's seen a lot. And I think he has a pretty good idea of where companies are and what tech, is working and what's not, in ways that, I could never imagine even assessing our own technology. And so I think being really honest about it is a great way to set a strong foundation for the relationship.
As a corporation, my team looks at maybe 10, 15 companies a week, approximately. We know what our priority spaces are in our technology roadmap, which also drives one of your other questions, which was at what maturity should companies accept investment from a strategic. It's also from our perspective, right? In some cases, we're looking for some technological support, so we might want to invest early and collaborate, co-develop, to bring some technologies into our own ecosystem. Some other cases, we're looking for a commercial complementary solution, so we wait a little longer. As Kyle was saying, I fully respect that. We take most meetings because we always learn. I've been doing specifically this VC job maybe 2.5 years. And I knew nothing. I know agriculture, but I didn't know one single startup. And I started speaking to so many. And you learn so much from all different companies, different experiences. And it's truly enriching. And all you can hope is that through those conversations, you're giving back just as much. Even if you don't end up investing, but through questions and challenges and ideas, you can contribute, and that creates a very rich environment, I think.
Yeah, I really have nothing. The only thing I would even add is just that it starts the foundation of starting point of where are they, and now you get to watch them grow. You're planting a seed with each other.
I agree.
And so, there's a lot to learn of just saying, well, what happened since the last meeting? Wow, that's really impressive. And making note of that actually can help breed, further integration.
This is why I love coming to these events, because you see all your friends and the new experiences they've had and struggles and successes. It's great.
So we're basically a commercial for FIRA 2025.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so that was kind of the first section of questions. Let's move on to the managing. What happens during the relationship? And I think a perfect example of that is CNH and Advanced Farm. You're currently in the middle of this relationship. You started a couple years ago, and Kyle, you also have a couple other strategics on your cap table. So walk us through what that relationship looks like and how you engage and the value that you've both been able to get out of that.
Yeah, sure. I'll start and then Michele.
Be honest.
Yeah, and then Michele can comment. I think like every relationship, there's a getting to know you period, right? And I think FIRA was the start of it. A couple years ago, we had the chance to be on a panel. This is a panel with Curtis too, and we started getting to know one another. And then I think from there, it was really an investment, an investment of our time to understand where there might be a fit. Obviously, the first fit is financial and becoming a partner in our business. And then I think over time, it becomes understanding the different parts of the organization that we might be able to leverage for our benefit, both from a learning point of view and then also from a practical point of view. And I think right now where we are is, as a founder, I can say that I'm just really pleased to see the level of effort in getting to know us that we've seen from Michele and his team, but also their colleagues around the globe. And I think that now we're at this phase where we're going to start to find really practical ways to work with one another that will, in turn, strengthen our story as a startup.
Perfect. That's exactly our experience. I think we've learned a lot. We're learning a lot. We admire tremendously the work that they're doing and the speed at which they're bringing up developments in their technology. That honestly, I don't know if it's the same for Alex, but I don't think our company would have that same agility. And so it really demonstrates how this model, where corporation invests in startups, is really effective. It's great, and I think our collaboration is going great.
That's awesome. So maybe a similar question for you, Alex. How do you get value and share value from both the anticipated startup investments you're making, but given that you're making venture capital fund investments as well, how are you engaging with some of those startups that they're investing in?
Yeah, well, it's really about just finding as much mutual value. I think, for us, Michele and Kyle hit along a lot of these points of like, you're leveraging a small company that is nimble and that is hungry, and that can move a lot faster than you can internally. And so because of that, it helps you accelerate R&D, and there's a lot that we can learn. But also through these minority investments, you're still fostering the spirit of innovation, and allowing them to continue to grow in a way that you can't always get those learnings internally. But then what we hopefully hope to offer is access to distribution, manufacturing, service, things that we know how to do, and the experience we have in commercializing and scaling products. And then there's also the credibility that we help bring. And the level of expertise and just understanding like what the customer problems are in the industry, understanding how to navigate the industry, and making the right network connections to enable that company to get to where they need to be.
Yeah. And then Darcy, I maybe a question for you on the managing, not necessarily managing the relationship, but how you got there, because it wasn't overnight that the joint venture was created, right? So how did you go about starting that relationship, but also contributing to it up until the decision was made?
Yeah, so I mean, and the joint venture came later, because first it was the acquisition to AGCO, but yeah, it didn't happen overnight at all. So it's a lot of factors that come together. So we have a lot of relationships with different OEMs through the business model, so I had a really good connections into many different OEMs and understanding those organizations and some strengths and weaknesses there too. And then also shaping our technology through those relationships. It's a little bit of the timing in the market. There was a time there where a large OEMs were aligning with their autonomy solution strategy and really looking for different companies that could accelerate that internally. And so we had that time. So this was kind of started the conversations in kind of late 2021 and closing in 2022. And a lot of that time was, it depends on your motivations for all of these relationships. So I am extremely passionate about seeing this thing that we've built being deployed globally. And so I through those conversations, it was maybe a little bit backwards. It was much more AGCO trying to talk me into it rather than the other way around, because I was unsure about whether this is going to be the right relationship. Is it just going to get steamrolled by the big beast kind of thing is the worry. And a lot of it comes down to personal relationships, is meeting with the individuals who are kind of leading those discussions and getting a sense of trust and how we fit into that strategy and what that could look like going forward. And so those were long back and forth conversations for a while that kind of led to a point of this feels like it could be a really good fit all around. So yeah.
Yeah, I like the point that you made about relationships. I think both the investing side, but also in agriculture in general, it's very relationship driven, and so it really matters how you start and maintain those conversations. So maybe one more question for you, Kyle. When you are talking about all these strategics on your cap table, how do you balance those relationships? Are there any challenges with having multiple of those voices in the same room?
Yeah, great question. I think that we're seeing it more and more as an industry, and what I would say is I've never seen any new strategic or financial investor be put off by the fact that we have multiple strategics on our cap table. I think what's been really interesting is I think we've served as a conduit for a lot of those companies to get to know one another even better than they did before, working with Advanced Farm, which is something that's been cool to see. I think the other thing, just from a founder's point of view, it's important to to always have arm's length agreements. I think most CVCs are sophisticated enough not to ask for anything that's off market. And so I think a lot of the superficial concerns about whether or not there are special rights or anything, I think a lot of that has gone away, and especially if you have good legal counsel. And I would say that from there, it's been a nice sort of way to collaborate across the different companies, and to have a little bit of competitive tension too, I think is also helpful on the cap table. So we're very pleased to have all three as partners.
Yeah, Michele, maybe same question to you, but from the perspective of serving on a board and serving in a room with other strategics, how do you balance those relationships?
To be honest, I think it's very valuable. I learn as much from them as I learn from the startup itself. I believe that there shouldn't be walls between us. We can have natural conversations and make the entire environment better by having such conversations, naturally, as Kyle was saying, with good legal advice and being careful that you're doing everything above board. But there are great opportunities that can be developed together. And in the specific case of Advanced Farm, we get along very well, as he said. We built a stronger relationship with Yamaha and Kubota. We have conversations around Advanced Farm and sometimes around other investments we could be doing together.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so that's our second segment. Third, I guess, moving on to the harvesting component, I think there's been a lot of talk about where all these ag tech startups are going and who is acquiring these technologies. Is it realistic to believe that OEMs will continue to be the long-term exit pathway for startups, or do we think IPOs or some other sort of consolidation is realistic in the near future?
I think it's realistic. But what I think is really important to know is as similar as some of these OEMs are, we do all have different strategies. So I think it's important for a startup not to bank that is the exit path, or at least understand.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah, at least understand how you fit into their strategy. So if that is your plan, start building these relationships and do your homework and really understand how that fits, because a lot of us have made bets. There's been a lot of M&A. It's why we probably have most recently started these CVCs, is because it's adding another tool to our toolkit. And so we're getting smarter and finding different ways to kind of find that pathway. But you really need to be able to differentiate that value. So I think it's not something to bank on. But I do think, my hope is that I do see more mergers, because I think that all of these different startups have really great competitive advantages, and that's something the fun that we have in the diligence process is really understanding what is that secret sauce. And you don't want to watch companies waste time recreating the wheel if they're all doing something that's a little bit redundant. The way that you really accelerate innovation is jumpstarting those things. And so I'd like to see more of these companies kind of come together and collaborate on what they're building.
Yeah, and I think just to add to kind of the question of the path for startups, there's a lot of uniqueness, I think, for agriculture particularly, that is set to do one with the timing of season. So there's only so fast you can accelerate things, because things go in cycles of seasons typically. And then the diversity of agriculture, there's so much diversity in agriculture, so coming up with some universal solution for anything is very rare, because usually you can get really good at addressing a problem in an area if you get close to the dirt and get close to the problem. But that, chances of saying, hey, we're great in orchards and that's just going to scale across corn and wheat, those are different problems in different ecosystems. So rarely do things scale without a lot of work on each of those things too. So a lot of the typical venture capital approach and timing and scaling towards IPOs, I think don't necessarily work in the same pattern. And so IPOs, I would imagine, would be much more rare for agriculture ag tech companies. But there's other paths. There's paths, certainly self-sufficiency is a good path, and not everybody needs to sell. And aiming towards self-sufficiency also gives you the ability to have more iterations, more at-bats, and try things without, oh, I'm gonna, if I don't have money by Wednesday, I'm done kind of thing, So that ability to kind of finding value in the market, I think, is a really good path. If concentrating on value to the market versus how am I gonna exit, I think can lead people, down paths where they can explore a lot.
I'm going to build on my point that Alex made. A distortive factor that happens when a CVC invests in a startup is that the startup thinks that half the job is done now. Because the CVC is on board, this company will buy me, everything will be sorted out. And that's a mistake. It shouldn't be the case, because we might invest because we see something that we like. That something that we like could only just be part of a co-development. In some other cases, it doesn't mature into something that we are going to want to buy. And if the company gives that possible future transaction for granted, it distorts the way it operates, the way it invests, the way it tackles risks, and it basically slows it down and reduces its opportunity to success. So they should never think that. We're there to help, for sure. We are there to learn and to give, but we should not be seen as their exit.
The only thing I would add, Joy, is what's really exciting to me, and this echoes some of the comments that Michele said earlier about this event in particular, is just seeing the growth in this part of the industry every year on year. And when we start to think about what that means, it's bigger than just agriculture. I think when you run some of the numbers on any one of the companies that is out here presenting, or in our company, you start to realize that there's going to be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of robotic arms operating outside in the next decade or two, or whatever the timeline that you believe. And I think that's really interesting, because it's going to bring in other OEMs beyond just ag OEMs. I mean, I think we're starting to see more and more robotic manufacturers who want to bring robots outside to change some of to move away from what's becoming a more commoditized industrial robot segment, right, to come out and add value in new ways. And so I think we're going to see, that's just one example of another group of potential exit opportunities that will come to this sector if we continue to see the growth that we're seeing.
So I want to dive in a little bit to Alex and Darcy's relationship between joint venture, the acquisition, all that stuff. Once the acquisition, joint venture is created, what goes into the integration process, and how do you decide what stays, what goes, or what is going to be completely separate from internal operations and all of that stuff? So I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so when we were first acquired, we had the benefit of basically staying quasi-independent for a while. And I knew it would be just a while. It wasn't going to be a long-term thing, but that was extremely valuable, because whatever you think is going to happen, it's going to be different than that in some way than the other. So it gave me time to acclimatize and not disrupt too much. And again, that was, I think, the interest of AGCO as well as my organization, because there's no benefit if they were just integrate the people, and then we would lose the agility and all those kind of things. And so having that time to kind of run independently and then shift our business model to the scale, what we could do to scale, was critical. And then as we got to the joint venture with Trimble, now we're getting much more the phase of integration of things. And so that's exciting as well, because it comes with ups and downs, and it's different in lots of ways than before. But the big thing is, I mean, part of an organization that has a distribution network that is global, and so to build that would be very, very difficult. So to have that, it comes with the challenges of integration, but those challenges in my mind are smaller than the challenges of building a global organization, which would have been the other path. And so it goes through a lot. But one thing I would just say is that you always have to continue to deliver. Like if you think like, oh, we got acquired, or we got or part of this joint venture, now can relax and whatever, like then I'd be gone right away, and the mission of kind of this global proliferation of this thing that we built would die with it. You need to continue to deliver that, just in a different context. So it didn't take any, I still have to have the foot on the gas through it, but it's just, navigating a little bit different world. So,
Anything to add, Alex?
No, because I joined like right
Yeah.
right around the acquisition was happening. So yeah, Darcy's really living it.
Cool. Okay, so we'll open it up for questions. While you all think of your questions, I think there's a microphone that's going around as well. Maybe just a general topic. What's up and coming in the ag tech robotics world? What are some of the most interesting things that you're seeing right now?
Oh, we're going into confidential information here.
Yeah.
No, honestly, I think that what all these companies are doing, what I'm seeing around here and other events or going around doing due diligences, is a tremendous effort to disrupt agriculture as we've known it in the last hundreds of years. And it's extremely interesting. And it's all driving towards some key values, right? They're all driving towards safety, towards sustainability, towards operating at a lower cost, towards removing tasks that are not really enriching and do not require any true value in order to have people more focused on value-added activities. And this makes our world so much more productive and efficient in the use of all resources, human or inputs or whatever it may be. And it's very exciting to see this happen because it's through all these startups, through all these efforts, they are changing the way we see the industry, which is amazing, right? I mean, given the different size and experience, we are learning from all these startups how we should adapt, how our farmers are changing, what they really want. And so I think we're learning as much from them as they're learning from us. And this is, I think, what has made these last 3-4 years of this ag tech revolution extremely interesting.
Yeah, it's fun to see, similar to like when you take out a driver, like how that changes a form factor, and so then what does that mean for the operations? But overall, like rethinking how crop production is done overall, like it's really fun to see that reset and for us to learn. And I'm sure, you know, McKelly can attest to this, like we're really learning from like the business model innovation. Like all of us are going through that. It's not just the early stage companies, it's the bigger companies too. And thinking about like, you know, really new customer discovery in that process, what that looks like. And yeah, it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, Alex is right, actually. It's not only the technology. We only focus on the technology. It's actually all the revenue model, the operating model, the relationship with the customer, how the dealers are changing the way they work. It's incredible. It's enriching for everybody.
I think one of the big learnings that I had was it's different in all different parts of the world, right? It's different in India, different in Africa, different in the U.S., Europe, everywhere. And so there's going to be it's a global problem, food production, and there's going to be different global solutions throughout the world. So, yeah. Yes, I think we have a question right here.
Yes. I'm sort of riffing off of what Secretary Ross spoke about this morning and some of the challenges of climate change, as well as public health issues and dietary issues and food availability, food supply chain. And, you know, as everyone knows, we have a massive farm bill that doesn't really support the kinds of agriculture and health that most of our experts tell us we need to shift to. And I'd like to know about the role of venture capital in addressing these broader social and political issues, and where USDA money goes, where the Farm Bill funding goes, and what they are doing to more actively promote and proactively address some of these public health and climate change issues, not just create more efficiencies in the current system.
Well, possibly we are not the right VCs because we are corporate venture capitals, so we don't have an independence. That said, I think most of the efforts, a group like ours, and Alex will talk about hers, is investing not only in efficiency in terms of more productive labor, but also in using fewer inputs, having less impact. And I assure you, we're investing significant amount of resources in trying to minimize the use of chemicals. So we're really trying to make agriculture safer and more sustainable. Cannot talk about food in itself. We don't impact the ingredients.
Yeah, no, well said. I think relevant to this question is thinking about how we're incentivizing farmers effectively to help change those practices, because it does trickle down to them, and we have to influence them in a way, and the best way is economically. And so how are they getting compensated and to make these changes? And some of it is through these efficiencies. But I would say on the other side of this, and this is another area where we're looking and hoping to invest in, is really how do we decarbonize our fleet? Because we are kind of driving scope 3 emissions through fuel use of our giant pieces of equipment that are on farms. So like, how do we think about not just alternative fuels and electrification, but the infrastructure to support that transition in rural areas?
And giving farmers tools to be more responsible in the use of carbon on the fields.
Yes.
I guess it's more of a visionary and mission-driven. Is there a coalition of venture capitalists who are working on broader issues? Because you have tremendous power in this society. I come from a Silicon Valley startup background, and I've been involved with a lot of venture capitalists. I'm now a journalist. So I think those are very impactful issues, the things I just mentioned, and you can foresee that public policy and funding will need to be shifted around to support them. So more of the sort of visionary type of people that I've worked with would be very concerned about those issues. So I'm sure they're a factor in some component in your, as you're looking 5, 10, 20 years out, right? So I guess I'm curious as to how these topics surface in your discussions, or maybe they don't.
Continuously, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
They are the basic of all our investments.
Right, so how do you evaluate the risks of what are sure to be public policy changes and funding changes? I mean, right now the Farm Bill is the biggest impediment to efficiency in the United States agricultural system. So if you're not working are you working at a system level, I guess is really my question.
As large corporations, we do manage and evaluate social and political risk in the decisions we take and align our investments with that. At the same level, we conduct dialogues at different levels of policy making in order to drive, from our perspective, what we think are the right policies that would support a better economic and social environment. That, I think, is how we operate.
Well, I guess maybe it's more concrete if you talk about it like in ESG terms, and what role common regulations on ESG might play in your planning.
I do not directly manage ESG, so it wouldn't be me the right person. I don't know.
yeah, I would say the same, but like we work very, like our sustainability team is a big stakeholder of venture, and so like how do we leverage venture as a new kind of catalyst for some of these initiatives? It's definitely like part of the conversation. I can't point to any specific initiatives right now, but yes, certainly relevant.
Another question, maybe. I'm a very early stage startup, and if you look at the projection of the startup forward, it could be $1 billion in 5 years, $10 billion in 10 years, or 20 or 50 or 100. To what extent do you, when you evaluate about a startup projection, investment, and the projection of the size of the business that is interest for a company like you to purchase? So, in what size of, is there a final size that is too small to you that you will not invest, or something which is too big that is not in the proportion? So, or in it's more the field or the talent, the people.
It's a mix.
Where is exactly coming? Yeah.
I'll just say, like, it totally depends. I would say our focus is really on the strategic rationale. So, like, I can tell you, and this is the average across like every CVC, is you invest across like Series A through Series C, like at a stage where they have like some commercial traction, maybe some revenue. So it's because we're a corporation, like we're still like less, more risk averse, right, than maybe a typical CVC. But at least for us, we're always focusing on like what is the strategic value that we're getting out of it, and then we kind of work backwards. So it really depends on that, because there is,
Very much context related.
Yeah, and Elliot.
I agree.
No rules.
It's case by case. We always agree. We seem to be very aligned. We normally invest. I mean, we don't have hundreds of investments, so drawing statistic results out of it is difficult. But we normally target Series A, Series B size investments, so investments where, with our target size of investment, we can have a relevant part. We can be a relevant part of the cap table. Definitely, we don't want to be overwhelming in the cap table. But our primary driver is strategic. So our first focus is understanding the technology that we're looking for, the team that we meet, and so the confidence that we have that we will work well together and build something that makes things better. That's the first priority.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Mia Temple, and I'm here representing a client, DART. My question is from a security background. I deal a lot with cybersecurity and insider risk mitigation. What are your thoughts about how ag tech and ag robotics are handling the insider risks or the security threats within their organizations, and where that might go in the future?
So I guess if the question's on product, meaning security on machines themselves, is that what you're referring to?
Yes, machines or information security with the data that's being collected
Yeah,
as well.
so there's lots of different ways to look at it, and this is kind of generally for engineering. I mean, you could solve the most difficult problem in the world. Let's say, let's imagine that we've scaled to 100,000 machines there. Wow, what risks we would have. Let's focus all on cybersecurity. Well, you'll spend all your engineering effort on things that are imagined risks further along. So I think it's really good to quantify risks, but also then address the problems that you have in front of you, and look at it realistically. So there's a lot of kind of imported thinking for agriculture in general that comes from automotive, and security is one area where it happens a lot. People will, because you'll hear about different cars that you can connect into them and control them. Well, the risk on a global deployed car is different than the risk on a machine that is in a field in more areas. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist there, and as you scale that risk increases, and like there's methods to assess those things. So there's methods where you can walk through and assess what those risks are. I think it's probably a good way to do it by a structured thinking approach, and really thinking what those risks are rather than sky is falling, let's tackle it all, because you'll burn all of your engineering effort on risks that are not your biggest risks necessarily at any given time. So I mean, the context matters a whole lot. It depends what you're deploying. Are you deploying a global solution or something that's going to build to that over time? But I think there's ways to kind of go through a more methodical way to structure that risk.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? We have one back there.
Thank you. It's very exciting to see all the developments in technology and in agriculture. It's such a critical industry. So it's very exciting to be here and see this. Can you comment on the acceptance and the take-up of these technologies that we see in the market by the ultimate consumer, which is the farmer?
So yeah, in my view, I mean, it depends on the area that you're talking about. So I think a really good approach is thinking of the farmer problem and how big is the problem. So a lot of the autonomy technologies has to do with labor availability, but how that plays out is different depending on tasks and areas and things like that. And so in adoption, I mean, in this area that we're in, there's a high issue with labor availability. But it's also with specialty crop solutions can be kind of niche, and so it's harder to scale those. And so adoption might be high in pockets, but are hard to scale across different areas. We are at the beginning, or not the beginning, in process, I guess, of a fundamental transition for autonomy technologies, but it will take 10, 15 years to really see that across all different areas of agriculture. But really, to me, we're at the beginning of scaling in broadacre. Really, our approach is with a retrofit first approach, because we see it'll be a little while before kind of global tractor production needs autonomy solutions built into those. First, they'll prove themselves into the retrofit market, and then later come in through factory installed solutions. But because the nature of agriculture in seasons and the diversity, it'll be not 1 year it happens, but over multiple years in different pockets.
I'll comment on this too. I think I think it's wonderful that there are many products at this conference that are starting to have that problem. I think with with the startup, there's always the stage of, can I do this one thing, and can I do it repeatably, and then can I do it reliably, and then can I scale it? And I think a lot of those companies that we're seeing in real time go through that transition, which is really exciting. I think that maybe in a less formal answer, I think growers have this filter that they've started to apply to ag tech startups, where it's, when you show up to the ranch, what car are you driving? And then when you step out, are you wearing boots? And then when you open the trailer and start to roll it out, can they see it realistically, work on their farm? And I think that's really that's another filter that people have to get to. And that last mile of when you start to get to a point where you can think about regularly using the machines in daily operations, that's a really tricky step, I think, for a lot of companies for a few reasons. One is we found that growers are the ones who are in control of changing their operations to accommodate automated whatever. And I think not everyone's set out for that. And so finding those early adopters who are willing to make the operational changes, a really simple one, for example, is the farm workday right now is centered around an 8-hour human workday. Well, autonomy really starts to pay off in 16, 24 hours a day of work, right? And so those are changes that you as a startup, you can't make. That has to be something that the grower opts into. And so I think spending a lot of time focusing on the user interface, user experience to make sure that those types of changes are adopted by the growers, and by identifying growers who are ready to make those changes, I think that's when we're going to start to see the acceleration of the adoption curve. But how wonderful that we're at that stage as an industry, that it's becoming a bigger issue.
Okay, last question over here.
Hello, Darcy. Darcy. I came from one company outside the USA, and we are now the supplier to both PTx Trimble and Trimble. So I'd like to have 2 questions. So firstly, would the other agriculture machine manufacturers, they are the PTx Trimble's potential customers, would they have concerns to use your precision agriculture solution, as you are a venture between Trimble and AGCO, and AGCO is a famous agriculture machine manufacturer? And the second is that from the product view, can you share more on what is PTx Trimble's focus, and especially the strategy on the hardware? Thank you.
Okay, so there's a lot of offerings within PTx Trimble, but just say for the first question, as should they have concerns, I think it's a joint venture between 2 very large and experienced companies. Trimble coming from positioning background and guidance and auto steer background, and AGCO being a very diverse machinery agricultural company. So those 2 powerhouses coming together to form technology solutions with an expertise in a technology and an expertise in the problem and the farmer, I think are going to produce very good things. So I think having concerns there, I think they're both companies coming from a lot of experience and with a lot of domain knowledge there. So I think that is just going to produce very good things. And then in terms of the products, I mean, my area is autonomy, so I lead the autonomy solutions. There's a lot in terms of the guidance and task automation solutions within PTX as well. But from my perspective, our products, our Outrun product is one that is just launched, which is an autonomous grain cart application, and our approach is retrofit first, a mixed fleet, so solutions that work on different colors of equipment, not just AGCO equipment, and then around the crop cycle, really focusing on corn and soybeans operations. So while the grain cart operation is the first, then there'll be tillage is another one, and we'll continue to different tasks across the solution. So then with that distribution network be delivered to farmers through their trusted dealers that they've known for a long time.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, great. Okay, so maybe one last question for all of us. 2 sentences. Are we at the cusp of more M&A activity in the ag tech, robotics, and automation space? And why do you think that?
Start? Okay. I think we're in a downturn in the agriculture market. The agriculture goes through ups and downs. I think for a little while there'll be a bit of a holdback, and there certainly is within the large OEMs in terms of investment in all areas, just to kind of ride through the downturn. I think coming out of that, there is going to be a boom, which is often the case because companies really push to innovate for those downturns, but it's hard to, and then you see a lot of that innovation coming out from those who are able to innovate through that downturn. And so, to me, I think that there'll be a lot of push to catch up in technology afterwards. So that'll come, with a little bit of a pullback. Tends to be a bit of a boom afterwards. So those who can really shape that technology with market solutions in that time are going to be well suited afterwards.
Yeah, well said. And I would only add, the only thing that might counter some of that is just it's a capital and, difficult environment. And so companies might be looking for different ways to exit and maybe sooner. Like we see a lot of companies open to investment, but also open to M&A. And so, I think we'll see, but I think it might be a little bit, slow, but then it might pick up in I don't know, a couple years.
I would say grower adoption has to come first, and then M&A will come second. And so I think the grower adoption timeline will inform the M&A timeline.
And I think we'll see, as it was mentioned during this chat, some mergers happening at startup level. We've seen, unfortunately, through these difficult couple of years, some cleanup of startups and venture capitals that were not fit for this environment, which, as we also discussed, it's a different environment from other technologies. It's a much longer cycle, and you have to be able to endure it. So I think we'll see some of that happening. And strategics, I think, will continue to monitor the landscape and continue doing M&A and building their capabilities.
Great. Well, Darcy, Alex, Kyle, Michele, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Stick around for the pitch session, but that concludes the OEM section of this panel.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.